Benjamin Moore just announced their 2023 color of the year, Raspberry Blush. In this video, we're going to talk about it, as well as the 7 other paint colors that were selected as part of their brand new color trends for 2023. One thing that you'll quickly notice here is there is quite a bit of color to be seen, whether it's deep teal, an ochre green, or a rich rusty color. It's pretty clear to me that Benjamin Moore is not afraid of reintroducing color back into the home. Now, before I get into the 8 main colors in this palette, I do also want to point out that they've included 4 neutral pairings that can coexist with all of these beautiful dynamic colors. That way, you do have some options if you're not really willing or ready to bombard your whole home with Starry Night Blue or Savannah Green. You'll see these other neutrals in some of the images I'll show you throughout the video, but just so you know, there's Etiquette, White Heron, Gray Owl, and Onyx. Really great neutral choices, honestly, because they kind of all do their own thing. Etiquette is a little bit warmer, White Heron is a very fresh white, Gray Owl is just a great gray choice, and then Onyx is thrown in if you want a black paint color as well. These are paint colors that you can really easily implement, whether you need something to sort of break up all of those bold colors, or maybe have more of a neutral base, and then have those colors as smaller accents here and there. Anyway, let's just get into these 8 headliner color trends colors, because I got to see a lot of them in person at that New York Color of the Year event. And if you haven't seen that reaction video, my initial thoughts from New York, I'll leave it in the cards up top so you can watch it after this one. Also, a little side note, I had a lot of fun looking through the Benjamin Moore website because they really packed a lot of really cool information on all of the colors, corresponding neutrals that go with each one, and even curated playlists of music that really match the vibe of each color. Love to see that. Very inventive, very fresh and updated, I feel. So right off the bat, I do notice that we see a lot of that up-to-date current representation of your warmer, more red-leaning colors that have been everywhere lately, but you also have some complementary, deeper, cooler colors as well. I guess we can start there with North Sea Green, and to me, this is a bit reminiscent of Aegean Teal from a few years back, which I think was a great color of the year choice that was really well regarded for sure. But that compared to now, we're seeing a color in North Sea Green that's deeper, darker, more saturated, less of that slightly grayed out touch that Aegean Teal had. This paint color is quite rich. And the same can be true for Starry Night Blue, which to me seems like a more fun, modern take on navy, mainly because it feels like it has less of that black to shade the color a little bit, which navy can sometimes have. And this one has a more pure purple undertone to it, which is a little subtle, but adds some complexity to it. It feels like a really fun choice altogether. And I think there's a lot of really great use cases for it. I mean, hello, bedroom vibes? I'd love to wake up or fall asleep in a starry night sky kind of room. I mean, the name's perfect too, right? The darkest color out of these 8 color trends colors is Wenge. And instead of going with an off black or a charcoal gray, we have a really deep chocolate brown, which I think is more of a, I guess, natural fit alongside Raspberry Blush and Cinnamon and Tofino Sunset, some of those more red or brown leaning colors. But it's cool because even when you pair it next to something like those cool colors we talked about, the dark teal, that dark purpley blue, it's still dark enough of a color where the undertones won't really be openly competing with one another, yet it's still a little more interesting than just a straight up black color for that extra contrast. But they've even thought of the people that want to use black, because you can just go with that neutral pairing option we talked about earlier in Onyx, if that's what you want. Now, I mentioned Tofino Sunset, which seems like the safe color choice of the palette, mainly because it kind of seems like a beige at first glance. But really, it has a pretty noticeable peachy pink undertone that kind of reminds me of like makeup foundation or something. Not that I know much about that. I mean, I have been to Sephora quite a few times, but mainly for cologne. I'm a cologne guy. I do think that Tofino Sunset acts as a great grounding color And I am a Libra after all, so I love a bit of balance. You know, you got all these crazy cool colors, and then you got Tofino Sunset to sort of settle things a little bit. It's neutral enough that it's not gonna jump off the walls on its own, especially next to some of those other colors, but it's also not a basic beigey gray that maybe lacks character in comparison. The other neutral in this palette is called New Age, which seems like a gray, especially next to everything, but it's actually a very light, muted purple that really starts to spread its wings, I guess, when used alongside those more crisp, stark whites. Next to White Heron, for example, that purple undertone is really clear, and I love how they showcased it in these photos. I even like the name, New Age, because it really speaks to the different direction we're taking paint colors nowadays. Before, my clients would specifically tell me, I want a gray that doesn't have a purple undertone, or a greeny gray or whatever, right? But now we're seeing a purple with a gray undertone, kind of. I mean, not actually that, because that sentence doesn't make sense. But the point is, even the most passive color in this palette, it has a noticeable dose of purple, which I think is fun. Now, if any of you follow Nick Lewis's channel, we recently were invited to do a collaboration with him about our predictions for color of the year, and I was craving a bit of mustard for some reason. I just wanted it to happen. I didn't really see it happening in the world, but it's what I just craved. Savannah Green is the closest color to what I would have wanted. And even though it's technically green, it has this beautiful ochre gold coloration that looks extremely yellow next to the teals and the blues of this palette. It's really fun, honestly, how colors like these can transform so drastically just based on the other colors you put next to them. And I saw that a lot in person in New York with all of the different displays and how all the colors were arranged. And even though I was sort of gunning for mustard, cinnamon is a color that I think a lot of us were expecting to see being represented as one of the next big colors. Rusty, terracotta, clay colors, they seem to be popping up all over in different stores and on the internet. It's this return to your more earthy, red-brown based neutrals that feel rich and revitalizing. We're seeing that a lot. What I find most interesting, however, is Benjamin Moore didn't make it their color of the year. I mean, they added cinnamon as part of their overall palette, but the honors of the actual color of the year went to raspberry blush, which is a beautiful coral color that almost seems to harken back to some of the fun 70s interior design trends that existed, where the word neutral didn't exist, apparently. Now, I'm definitely going to take some deeper dives on all 8 of these colors in upcoming episodes, but I gotta say, after processing things over the past 2 days, I really enjoyed the selection of raspberry blush. Benjamin Moore could have easily followed suit with the status quo by staying neutral, but having maybe some interesting undertones happening that's evocative of the times, aka an earthy red undertone. I mean, looking at Tofino Sunset and Cinnamon, for example, those are 2 different directions that you could easily justify taking your color of the year in, but instead, they turned up the color, they cranked up the saturation, and I think they just made a really fun and inventive choice. Let me know what your favorite color was from the palette so I can review it first alongside some color pairings, because that's what we do on this channel many times a week. And you've got to see my first initial impressions of raspberry blush in this video, where me, Borche, and Peter, the owners of the Paint People, we all went to New York together. We had a blast. Super fun.